Leviticus chapter 9. The priest offers sacrifices. On the 8th day Moses sent for Aaron, his sons, and the elders of Israel. He said to Aaron, "Bring a bull calf for your sin offering. Bring a ram for your burnt offering. They must not have any flaws. Offer them to the Lord. Then speak to the Israelites. Tell them, bring a male goat for a sin offering. Bring a calf and a lamb for a burnt offering. Both of them must be a year old. They must not have any flaws. Bring an ox and a ram for a friendship offering. Sacrifice all of them to the Lord. Also bring a grain offering. Mix it with olive oil. Today the Lord will appear to you." The people got the things Moses commanded to them. They took them to the front of the tent of meeting. The whole community came up close to the tent. They stood there in front of the Lord. Then Moses said, "You have done what the Lord has commanded, so the glory of the Lord will appear to you." Moses said to Aaron, "Come to the altar. Sacrifice your sin offering and your burnt offering. Pay for your sin and the sin of the people. Sacrifice the people's offering. Pay for their sin. Do just as the Lord has commanded." So Aaron came to the altar. He killed the calf as a sin offering for himself. His sons brought its blood to him. He dipped his finger into the blood. He put some of the horns that stick out from the upper corners of the altar. He poured out the rest of the blood at the bottom of the altar. He burned the fat and the kidneys on the altar. He also burned the long part of the liver. All these parts were from the sin offering. Aaron did just as the Lord had commanded. He burnt up the meat and hid outside the camp. Then he killed the animal for the burnt offering. His sons handed him its blood. He splashed it against the sides of the altar. They handed him the burnt offering piece by piece. It included the animal's head. Aaron burned everything on the altar. He washed the inside parts and the legs. He burned them on top of the burnt offering on the altar. Then Aaron brought the people's offering. He took the goat for their sin offering and killed it. He offered it for a sin offering. He did just as he had done with his own sin offering. He brought the animal for the burnt offering. He offered it the way the law requires. He also brought the grain offering. He took a handful of it and burned it on the altar. It was in addition to that morning's burnt offering. Aaron killed the ox and the ram as the friendship offering for the people. His sons handed him the blood. He splashed it against the sides of the altar. His sons also brought the fat parts of the ox and the ram. They included the fat tail and the layer of fat. They also included the kidneys and the long part of the liver. Aaron's sons placed everything on the breasts of the animals. Aaron burned the fat on the altar. He lifted up the breasts and the right thigh and waved them in front of the Lord as a wave offering. He did it just as Moses had commanded. Then Aaron lifted up his hands toward the people. He gave them a blessing. He had already sacrificed the sin offering, the burnt offering, and the friendship offering, so he stepped down from the altar. Moses and Aaron went into the tent of meeting. When they came out, they gave the people a blessing. The glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. The Lord sent fire on the altar. The fire burned up the burnt offering along with the fat parts. All the people saw it. Then they shouted for joy. They fell with their faces to the ground. Leviticus chapter 10. The Lord kills Nadab and Abihu. Nadab and Abihu were two of Aaron's sons. They got their shallow cups for burning incense. They put fire in them. They added incense to it. They made an offering to the Lord by using fire that wasn't allowed. They did it against his command. So the Lord sent fire on them. It burned them up. They died in front of the Lord. Then Moses spoke to Aaron. He said, "That's what the Lord was talking about when he said, 'Among those who approach me, I will show that I am holy. In the sight of all the people, I will be honored.'" So Aaron remained silent. Moses sent for Mishael and Elzaphan. They were sons of Aaron's uncle Uzziel. Moses said to them, "Come here. Carry the bodies of your cousins outside the camp. Take them away from in front of the holy room." So they came and carried them outside the camp. It was just as Moses had ordered. The bodies of Nadab and Abihu still had their inner robes on them. Moses spoke to Aaron and Eleazar and Ithamar. They were Aaron's sons. Moses said, "Don't let your hair hang loose. Don't tear your clothes. If you do, you will die. And the Lord will be angry with the whole community. But all the Israelites are allowed to show they are sad. They are your relatives. They may mourn for those the Lord has destroyed with fire. Don't leave the entrance to the tent of meeting. If you do, you will die. That's because the Lord's anointing oil has made you holy." So they did what Moses told them to do. Then the Lord spoke to Aaron. He said, "You and your sons will go into the tent of meeting. When you do, you must not drink any kind of wine. If you do, you will die. This is a law that will last for all time to come. This is so that you can tell the difference between what is holy and what is not. You must be able to tell the difference between what is clean and what is not. Then you will be able to teach the Israelites all the rules I have given them through Moses." Moses spoke to Aaron and to Eleazar and Ithamar. They were Aaron's two remaining sons. Moses said, "Take the grain offering left over from the food offerings presented to the Lord. It is very holy. Make bread without yeast from it. Eat it beside the altar. Eat it in the holy area. It's your share and your son's share of the food offerings presented to the Lord. These rules are in keeping with the command the Lord gave me. But you and your sons and your daughters can eat the breast that was waved. You can also eat the thigh that was offered. Eat them in a clean place. They have been given to you and your children. They are your share of the friendship offerings the Israelites bring. The thigh that was offered must be brought together with the fat parts of the food offerings. The breast that was waved must be brought in the same way. All of it must be lifted up and waved in front of the Lord as a wave offering. It will be the share for you and your children for all time to come. That's what the Lord has commanded." Moses asked about the goat that was brought as the sin offering. He found out that it had been burned up. So he became angry with Eleazar and Ithamar. They were Aaron's two remaining sons. Moses asked them, "Why didn't you eat the sin offering in a place near the holy room? The offering is very holy. It was given to you to take the people's guilt away. It paid for their sin in the sight of the Lord. The blood of the offering wasn't taken into the holy room, so you should have eaten the goat in a place near the holy room. That's what I commanded." Aaron replied to Moses, "Today the people sacrifice their sin offering to the Lord. They also sacrifice their burnt offerings to him. But a terrible thing has happened to me. 2 of my sons have died. Would the Lord have been pleased if I had eaten the sin offering today?" When Moses heard that, he was satisfied. Leviticus chapter 11. Clean and unclean food. The Lord spoke to Moses and Aaron. He said to them, "Speak to the Israelites. Tell them, many animals live on land. Here are the ones you can eat. You can eat any animal that has hooves that are You can eat any animal that has hooves that are separated completely in two, but it must also chew the cud. Some animals only chew the cud. Some only have hooves that are separated in two. You must not eat those animals. Camels chew the cud, but their hooves are not separated in two, so they are unclean for you. Rock badgers chew the cud, but their hooves are not separated in two, so they are unclean for you. Rabbits chew the cud, but their hooves are not separated in two, so they are unclean for you. Pigs have hooves that are separated completely in two, but they do not chew the cud, so they are unclean for you. You must not eat the meat of those animals. You must not even touch their dead bodies. They are unclean for you. Many creatures live in the water of the oceans and streams. You can eat all those that have fins and scales. Treat as unclean all the creatures in the oceans or streams that do not have fins and scales. That includes all those that move together in groups and all those that do not. Treat them as unclean. Do not eat their meat. Treat their bodies as unclean. Regard as unclean everything that lives in the water that does not have fins and scales. Here are the birds you must treat as unclean. Do not eat them because they are unclean. The birds include eagles, vultures, and black vultures. They include red kites and all kinds of black kites. They include all kinds of ravens. They include horned owls, screech owls, gulls, and all kinds of hawks. They include little owls, cormorants, and great owls. They include white owls, desert owls, and ospreys. They also include storks, hawks, bats, and all kinds of herons. Treat as unclean every flying insect that walks on all fours, but you can eat some flying insects that walk on all fours. Their legs have joints so they can hop on the ground. Here are the insects you can eat. You can eat all kinds of locusts, cicadas, crickets, and grasshoppers. Treat as unclean every other creature with wings and 4 legs. You will make yourselves unclean if you eat these things. If you touch their dead bodies, you will be unclean until evening. If a person picks up one of their dead bodies, that person must wash their clothes. They will be unclean until evening. Suppose an animal has hooves that are not separated completely in two, or suppose an animal does not chew the cud, then these animals are unclean for you. If you touch the dead body of any of them, you will be unclean. Many animals walk on all fours, but those that walk on their paws are unclean for you. Anyone who touches their dead bodies will be unclean until evening. If a person picks up their dead bodies, that person must wash their clothes. They will be unclean until evening. These animals are unclean for you. Many animals move along the ground. Here are the ones that are unclean for you. They include weasels, rats, and all kinds of large lizards. They also include geckos, monitor lizards, wall lizards, skinks, and chameleons. These are the animals that move around on the ground that are unclean for you. If you touch their dead bodies, you will be unclean until evening. Suppose one of them dies and falls on something, then that thing will be unclean. It does not matter what it is used for. It does not matter whether it is made of wood, cloth, hide, or rough cloth. Put it in water. It will be unclean until evening. After that, it will be clean. Suppose one of these animals falls into a clay pot. Then everything in the pot will be unclean. You must break the pot. Any food that could be eaten, but has water on it, that came from the pot is unclean. And any liquid that could be drunk from it is unclean. Anything that the dead body of one of these animals falls on becomes unclean. If it is an oven or a cooking pot, break it. It is unclean, and you must consider it unclean. But a spring or a well for collecting water remains clean. That is true even if the dead body of one of these animals falls into it. But anyone who touches the dead body is not clean. If the dead body falls on any seeds that have not been planted, the seeds remain clean. But suppose water has already been put on the seeds, and suppose the dead body falls on them, then they are unclean for you. Suppose an animal you are allowed to eat dies. If anyone touches its dead body, they will be unclean until evening. If they eat part of the dead body, they must wash their clothes. they will be unclean until evening. If they pick up the dead body, they must wash their clothes. They will be unclean until evening. Treat as unclean every creature that moves along the ground. Do not eat it. Do not eat any of these creatures. It does not matter whether they move on their bellies. It does not matter whether they walk on all fours or on many feet. It is unclean. Do not make yourselves unclean by eating any of these animals. Do not make yourselves unclean because of them. Do not let them make you unclean. I am the Lord your God. Set yourselves apart. Be holy, because I am holy. Do not make yourselves unclean by eating any creatures that move around on the ground. I am the Lord. I brought you up out of Egypt to be your God. So be holy, because I am holy. These are the rules about animals and birds. These are the rules about every living thing that moves around in the water. And these are the rules about every creature that moves along the ground. You must be able to tell the difference between what is clean and what is not. You must also be able to tell the difference between living creatures that can be eaten and those that can't.